Good morning. If you can take your seats, that'd be great. Welcome to the 2022 TrueSport Talks Mental Wellness and the Student Athlete Conference. We are thrilled to have what will be a packed house as people continue to trickle in here in the audience today, and we are happy to welcome, as of last night, we had almost 1,700 virtual registrations, so welcome to those who are joining us online, as well as those of you who got out in the Colorado cold this morning to join us, so thank you for being here. This year's event is the culmination of about a year's worth of planning from a team of 4 folks and all the folks at our organization who jump in and help us out to do something that is far bigger than any of us combined. Last year we had our inaugural event, and we hoped maybe we'd get about 200 people who might be interested, and we ended up with well over 1,500 people enrolled last year. That speaks to us about the importance of the topic that we're covering. The conversations today, while we hope are enjoyable and certainly something you can engage with and feel comfortable about talking around, we know that sometimes they're very difficult topics to discuss. We know that the stakes couldn't be higher for the next generation of our young athletes and our developing athletes. The risk of not getting this right is a burden that's too great to bear. It's going to take the efforts, the concerted energy, the insight, the wisdom, the commitment of everyone involved in these student athletes' lives to make a difference in a way that is lasting and impactful. And we know at TrueSport that there is a ton of great work that's happening around this country, around this very topic. We're not suggesting that today's the only answers. We're not suggesting that today this is the only space for these conversations. There is room for all of us. We welcome everyone to the table who has a heart for student athletes, because as I mentioned, the stakes are too high not to accept the responsibility. For those of you who aren't familiar with TrueSport, I should probably start there as a welcome. So TrueSport is an outreach arm. It's a grassroots sort of approach from the U.S. Anti-Doping Agency. We invest in the next generation of athletes. We believe in the integrity of sport. We believe in protecting sport for all the good that it can do, and trying to stand up for what is right, for winning the right way, for competing with integrity, for making sure that athletes experience all that sport can offer and limit the negative impacts that it can create. We pour into young people every day, and we do it because it's the right thing to do. This is not something you do because there's money to be made. You do this because you care about sport. You care about those young people. Somewhere, someplace, there's a kid who picked up their first ball. They'll do it today. Somebody heard their first starting gun. Somebody picked up their first lacrosse stick. And they are counting on us to do it right. Because as we know, sport can be incredibly edifying. And sometimes it creates challenges that young athletes, developing athletes, struggle to navigate. It's super important for us to have these conversations, to invest in systems of support that make it right, that ensure that protection is available for young athletes. And so we welcome you to those conversations today. Last year when we did this, we were like, this is kind of an important topic. We should jump in. And as it turns out, it's not just kind of an important topic. Travis mentioned in our welcome last night, this may be the topic of our generation. This may be the thing that our young people need the most, is support around this. We've got a lot of great coaches here. We've got athletic trainers. We've got sport admin. We've got collegiate administration. We've got some incredible minds in this room and joining us virtually. We have an obligation to do something meaningful with that, and we're so grateful that you're partnering with us. If you pay attention to the statistics around this topic, if you look at any of the NCAA studies that have recently happened, if you look at the Aspen Institute State of Play, you can see that mental wellness continues to be reported as one of the biggest challenges our young athletes face. There's some good news. There's some really good news, despite some of the bad news, which is that we've got 1.5 to 2 times more expression of anxiety, depression with our young athletes, as we saw pre-COVID. But there's some good news, as I mentioned. Some of the good news is that we have student athletes reporting lower levels of hopelessness than they did in 2021. So it matters. It matters that we're pouring into these conversations. It's not a lost cause. We're seeing that parents are reporting improving mental health and wellness in their students and in their children. This is good news. So what we hope to do today, and we'll bring up our MC here to get us started in just a second, is take that momentum and leverage it. To have each and every one of you take these lessons, take these conversations back to where you do your work and evangelize this broadly, because we can't do it alone. So welcome again. We're so honored to have you today. It is my greatest privilege right now to introduce to you our MC for the day, Corey Robinson. Corey is, among many, many things, currently an NBC spokesperson. He is a sports broadcaster. He is a podcast personality. He is a sports analyst. He's a man of many talents. He was also a Division I receiver for Notre Dame, who I believe caught his very first touchdown pass right here in Colorado Springs, playing Air Force Academy, and just a phenomenal athlete. His credentials speak for themselves. But one of the things I was most struck with in getting to know Corey over the last day or so is just that what he leads with is who he is as a person. It's exactly what TrueSport believes in, that we are building great people, not just great athletes, and that great sport can also help people develop into great humans. And we talked about integrity last night. We talked about why it's so important to show up with authenticity, to be vulnerable, to be real, and that really that's a pathway to great athletic performance, not just being a great person. So Corey, it is my honor to welcome you. Thank you. Please welcome Corey Robinson.
That was much too kind of an introduction. Thank you so much, Jen. It's a pleasure to be here. I want to lead with integrity. I think it's so fascinating. This word keeps coming up. What does it mean? I think it's a very rare thing in our world today, which is incredibly sad. But one thing that my father taught me, his great gift to me, my dad is a three-time Olympian. He was part of the Dream Team. He won an NBA championship. His name is David Robinson. What he taught me, the greatest legacy, my inheritance, is integrity. What my grandma taught me, her legacy to me was faith. So when I think about these words, integrity, faith, how does that actually translate into living a life that invites other people to come along with you? And that's why we're here today, because what we want to do is we want to bring young people, teenagers, our brothers, our sisters, our sons and daughters from that place of darkness, that dominion of darkness, and bring them into light. And how do we do that? What are the concrete ways we can do that to show them that, one, you're not alone. Michael Phelps is right there with you. Simone Biles, these people that you look up to have also experienced darkness, and they know what it's like, but they didn't stay there. They got through it. How did they get through it? So that's why we have these wonderful panelists, these wonderful moderators who can help equip us with the real tools to go from darkness to light. And just briefly, before, I don't want to bore you. Like I said, I don't have much to offer. But what I do offer, I freely give. And that is my own personal experience and my story. And my mental wellness journey really comes from my time in college. I was playing football and running for student body president at Notre Dame. And at the time, it was really cold and it was really dark. It was in January. I don't know if you've ever been in South Bend in January. There's something called a permacloud. There's about 5 hours of sunlight. And I'm from Texas. We have more than 5 hours of sunlight where I'm from. And so it was a really dark time for me, both literally and figuratively, right? And there was a lot of fear because I had just come off of a year where I had 2 concussions, and I was trying to figure out, what does football look like for me? I got a 3rd concussion in the middle of all this. We were waking up at 4, 5, 6 in the morning to go work out, lift, do winter conditioning, go to spring ball. Then me and my student government team would just hammer out policy. We'd figure out, okay, what do we want to do? How do we want to change the lives of students on campus today? Talking about really heavy things like sexual assault. So then after that, I'd go to class. You can't forget the student athlete part of that. So then I'd go to class, and then at night, we would go canvas. We'd go knock on every single door, and I think we hit 20 dorms on campus. So that was my day. I'd probably go to sleep around midnight or 1 a.m. And I did that for weeks. And then we won, and then then it was the next part, which was like the transition materials, interviewing people, and it just never ended. It got to the point where my medical team at Notre Dame was like, look, Corey, you're running yourself ragged. Like, you gotta go see a sports psychologist. And it was, at that moment for me, was a very pivotal moment. It was a turning point because I thought that was a sign of weakness. I did not understand that it was actually a sign of strength and true leadership. What a true champion is someone who realizes that, hey, if I keep going down this route, I'm doing a detrimental service to not only myself, but everyone around me, my community, the people that rely on me. I need to seek help. Then I finally relented. I was humbled in that regard. And I met this sports psychologist who just changed my life, who gave me the tools and equipped me with the tools I needed to be able to push through that and help me become a better servant, a better leader, a better student body president, and a better teammate and coach. But it came at just the right time. And it was because someone was there, like our next moderator and keynote speaker, Candice Williams. Someone was there to do that for me, to push me towards seeking help. And I think when we talk about integrity and this other concept of fear, which is so prevalent in our youth, we have to think about support and teammates. And that's why I think it's very critical for us to listen to what Candice has to say. She's the director of Mind, Health, and Wellness for the Boston Celtics. She's a nationally recognized researcher and mental health professional. She's a Texas native. Love that. I'm from San Antonio. In Boston, Massachusetts, specializing in mental health counseling and sport performance. And she, before joining the Boston Celtics, she previously had stints serving as an athletics counselor at the Ohio State University Athletics Department, working with the football team, the basketball team, as well as some other programs there, where she provided psychotherapy and consultation services to student athletes, coaches, and athletic support staff. Prior to transitioning to college athletics, Dr. Williams served as a program manager for the Trust, powered by the NFLPA. There, she assisted retired NFL players in all aspects of their transition following the success of their NFL career. So as a mental health professional, not only does she lead with care, but she also embodies that spirit of service and advocacy while supporting the well-being of athletes. Her passions include developing player-centric programs focused on athlete development and transition, content creation on mental health-related topics, as well as providing preventative and responsive training to coaches, parents, mental health professionals, and athletic staff on the importance of athlete mental health and wellness. Over the past 10 years, Dr. Williams has crafted a respected career and professional reputation supporting the personal and emotional development of athletes at various levels of their athletic careers. An experienced mental health professional, Dr. Williams is dedicated to building transformational relationships with stakeholders and developing innovative ways to foster access between athletes and mental health services. And she's been everywhere. ESPN College Game Day, Men's Health Magazine, NCAA Championship Magazine, USA Today. She's all over the place trying to being so committed to elevating this conversation about mental health and about sports performance. And one thing that we lead with is clearly the mind, right? So this conversation that we'll start with is, how do you train from the mind up, understanding that there's a spectrum to mental health and wellness, just like there's a spectrum to physical health and wellness, and how do you start here to help you become a full and holistic student athlete in person. So without any further ado, please welcome Dr. Candice Williams.
I'm not going to use the podium. I like to get into people's business and faces and spaces in terms of talking with you all. So please, this is not a formal space. I see a lot of folks in the room. I'm curious who we have in the room. As he read from my bio, I've been everywhere. I've done a lot of different things. And now in my current role, I get to work with professional athletes as the director of Mind, Health, and Wellness at the Boston Celtics. And so it's coined Mind, Health, and Wellness and not Mental Health and Wellness, because the mind is a muscle just like any other muscle in your body. And we talk about the intersectionality between mental health and sports performance, and really educating players, coaches, and people within that arena, space that I work in, around just mind health, and not just limiting it to it being mental or physical. So before we get started, I want to know by show of hands who we have in the room. Who here are coaches? If you raise your hand. Okay, we have a good number of coaches. Athletic trainers. All right. Moms, dads of student athletes. Okay. Any sports medicine staff in terms of nurses, doctors? Anybody that I didn't name? Feel free. Professors, okay. And just so you know, I like this to be interactive, so I'm not talking at you, I'm talking with you, right? And so the people who are in this room, those of you who are watching, the reason I have been successful in my role is because I have been able to work in a collaborative way with coaches, athletic trainers, professors, moms, dads, team doctors and whatnot when we talk about mental health. And so my goal for my spiel here for 45 minutes, if you allow me to have your time for that long, is to really talk about from a systematic way, how do we train the body from the neck up and not just the neck down? When we talk about mental health, we talk about elevating the conversation around, bringing awareness to it. We know that it is an important topic to talk about, whether it be student athletes, whether it be for ourselves, right? We all went through a global pandemic. If you went through that and you weren't affected by it, please come see me later and tell me how you did that, right? Even myself as a mental health professional, I had to, and my colleague Sharon Sumler, who's here, she's will be on a panel later. She's at Ohio State. I mean, we had to really get in the trenches and provide services to athletes, to staff, while we were also going through it, right? So I am a person that also had to experience the same thing that my student athletes have experienced. Even now in my current role, I got a taste of what it's like to be on social media and people talking about you when I didn't even expect it, given some things that we had happen recently with our team. And so I use every opportunity as a learning experience, and I want you all to really join me in that as well. So as we talk about mental health and wellness, think about the role that you play as a coach, as an athletic trainer, as a mom, as a dad, as a professor, as it relates to the language that we want to adopt moving forward and having the conversation and being a part of it. You know, if you look at I think it's Bronfenbrenner's ecological systems model, where we talk about micro level to macro level, right? Student athletes are experiencing a lot of different things when it comes to, school, practice, interaction and interpersonal relationships, intrapersonal relationships when it comes to themselves. And then at the macro level, how we talk and speak and design resources and services also impacts them directly. And so just for your knowledge, right now in my role, I'm in a new position. I've been there for 4 months, and I'm having to build services for elite athletes, you know. And on my team, anybody know who's on my team? Name some folks. Who's a basketball player on the Boston Celtics? Okay, we got Jason Tatum, Derek White, who else? Jaylen Brown, right? I work with some elite athletes, right? And people assume that just because they're at that level, what do they need a mental health professional for? Why is it that the Boston Celtics have decided to have a full-time position, one of 13 full-time positions in the NBA? There's 30 teams, right? And I'm one of 13 practitioners who are full-time. And then look at the NCAA. They mandated that, hey, every Power 5 school needs to have a mental health professional in these spaces. So we hear people talk about mental health professionals, the increase in awareness of having people in those positions, but really what does that mean and what does that look like, right? So I'm in a position where I'm having to build those things out for elite athletes at the highest level of basketball. And guess what? They're receptive to it. Right? I have a general manager that's receptive to it. I have coaches that are receptive to it. I left a football team where Coach Day was receptive to it. So it does work. So I've been in positions and been in places at the highest level where having those conversations, implementing and building those systems actually works. And so my hope is that as you listen to me talk, you write something down, something resonates with you, you have questions, feel free to ask those. You know, if you feel like it's on your heart and you're like, I can't wait until the end, I need to ask this question, raise your hand, right? And I don't want you all to be silent. I want you to be thinking and to be present, okay? And so when I talk about this concept of training the body from the neck up and not just the neck down, I adopted it from this whole strength-based, strength coach type of aspect. So when I was at Ohio State, I was talking to the strength coaches and was telling them, you know, you have these guys come in and they lift, right? They come in and at baseline, you're trying to get them to lift 25 pounds heavier. You're trying to get them to be stronger, essentially. And you have a plan for them when it comes to developing their strength. They don't push back against it. They might, you know, be like, oh, I don't want to go to lift, or like, oh, this is hard, right? But the goal is they're developing this grit, this grind to get to that next level because they want to be stronger, right? And metaphorically speaking, we can do that from the neck up. What does the weight room look like mentally? Right? And so how I look at myself as a therapist, as a psychotherapist, is not just we're talking about your feelings and your emotions, but we're also looking at your mind as a muscle, no different than your hamstring, tricep, and bicep, right? And if you have a hamstring, tricep, and bicep, which we all do, when you go to the gym and you fatigue it and you work it out, it can be sore the next day if it's not used to doing those ranges of motion. Or if you work it out too much, guess what? You're not going to be able to utilize it when you need it, right? And so when it comes to training the body, there's a method to that in terms of getting them ready for game day. So why don't we adopt the same concept when it comes to the mind? Now, what does that look like? You can have a practitioner, a mental health professional on your team, like myself, like some of the people you'll see on the panel, who can really work with that athlete on an individual basis, right? But if you have 1,100 student athletes and 5 therapists, we wouldn't be able to see every athlete, even if we wanted to. And so how do we make that a point to be a part of best practice across the board on a macro level? So, for instance, if you're a strength coach and you have this regimen and you're working students out in terms of getting them to a place of being more stronger, more physically agile, you have a plan for that. One of the things that they did at Ohio State was on active recovery days, they did belly breathing with those guys. Taught those people how to do that. I didn't have to be there to do that. They did it, right? Having a coach to be able to say, hey, we're going to adopt some form of mindfulness or reflection time.
Would that be the micro level?
Yes, the micro level, but the macro level would be understanding that it needs to be embedded in different spaces, right? And making that not a recommendation, not mandatory, but like that's just the way we do things, right? Right? You stretch before every practice. No strength coach at a D1 university would train their athletes and not stretch them before or after physically. So why won't we adopt that concept when it comes to mentally, in terms of being able to teach athletes how to be able to adopt that piece? Because you hear people talk about coping skills, teaching them coping skills on an individual level, on a micro level. Yes, that works, right? But when it comes to teaching them how to be in a neutral stance, nothing is good or bad, it just is. Being able to help them understand in terms of mental recovery and be mentally agile as coaches, as people in different positions, you have the ability to embed that and thread that through, in your coaching. Right? No different than if you teach them a skill level on how to dribble a basketball, a three-point stance, whatever the case may be, or how to look for the open space in a game if they're a wide receiver. We want to help them. How do you look for that open space in life? Right? And so the goal is the language around how we talk about mental health, and not just it being you need to go see someone when things get hard, but how can I support you in this moment? You'll hear people talk about positive self-talk, guided meditation, doing meditation and all of those things. Those are really important, and it's not just a woo-woo type of thing of like, hey, sit here for 45 minutes in the dark and it'll help you feel better. There's actually a science to that when it comes to the brain and it being a muscle, right? So we all have what's called a central nervous system, right? Can somebody give me the 2 functions of our central nervous system? Anybody know those? Right? Well, in terms of fight, flight, or freeze responses, right? Imagine, we are people, and you have student athletes that are athletes, but they're also like doing all these like physics, and like our bodies are doing these things to help us perform. So it's not just a matter of if a person is stronger or weaker. It is actually, our fight, flight, or freeze responses are connected to that sympathetic and parasympathetic nervous system. Right? So when somebody tells you, you need to be in the present moment, you need to breathe, you need to be mindful, what it is your body is actually, if we were to look at the skeletal makeup of our bodies and look at our central nervous system and realize that our brain is connected to our spinal cord, which is also connected to different nerves that send signals to the rest of our body. For us to be able to do things, right? I can wave my hand and talk to you all at the same time, right? Because our bodies help us to do that. And so when we talk about mindfulness, when we talk about training the brain from the neck up, we talk about this being able to use your own devices, not just apps, if you so choose. Calm app is cool, Headspace is great. Music and those types of things, but being able to center yourself and be grounded actually has the ability not just to keep you at less, decrease your anxiety, but your body is actually responding to that, you know, in a way that it is activating that parasympathetic nervous system that is responsible for relaxation. For all of you to feel grounded right now. From my point of view, you all look pretty relaxed, but some of you may be dealing with some things internally of like, okay, I gotta pick my kid up later, or I gotta go do this thing, right? And you feel that in your body, right? Your sympathetic nervous system, again, it's responsible for that fight, flight, or freeze, and that is where we feel tense. Or you notice like when you get anxious, your heart might palpitate, or you might have some tension somewhere, right? And so when we talk about mindfulness and meditation, when we talk about being able to do guided meditation, imagery, those types of things, it's actually having an impact on your body and your mind. For instance, diaphragmatic breathing that you do, if you take a deep breath and breathe out, you know, people will say, you know, take a deep breath, that helps to center you, it's going to help you feel better. It's actually sending oxygen to your brain, right? And not only doing that just as a human being, but think about it as a student athlete when they talk about strength training and they're breathing in and breathing out, input and output. When they look at that from a standpoint of conditioning and strength, they're actually using their breath to help them lift the heavy things and do the heavy things, right? And so why not incorporate that and adopt that and really focus on those types of skill buildings when we talk about training the body from the neck up with student athletes, because those are things that they have at their own disposal to be able to do, right? The other thing is really looking at guided imagery. Anybody know what guided imagery is? Just take a stab at it.
Well, it's a review of like your peak performance, or it's visualizing what you'd like to do.
Yep. Yep. And how many of you, I mean, this is personal disclosure, you don't have to, I will, use guided imagery just in your day-to-day life, envisioning yourself doing something and succeeding at it, right? How powerful is that for you? Somebody tell me, do you find it to be a really great tool, or do you feel like I'm daydreaming?
I think it's as essential as like breathing or having your schedule for your day.
Right, yeah, it puts you in a space to be able to visualize and put yourself in the future acting as if, right? And that is something that, believe it or not, is just as impactful as you doing the actual thing every day, right? There's science behind that. Research has showed that there's a part of the brain that is just as activated when you do guided imagery, no different than you are shooting 100 threes every day, right? And so the goal is when we talk about mental health, beyond just being, hey, if you're feeling a certain type of way, talk to someone. It is really being able to say, let's look at how we communicate, educate, expose athletes, youth athletes especially, around, okay, how can they visualize and add this concept of mental health and wellness, right? We know that there's a continuum. There's mental health and mental illness. Oftentimes people will use those words interchangeably, right? Just like there's physical health and there's physical illness. And so this is just a little sidebar. I'll give you an education right now. In terms of mental health, how I look at it like physical health is that we all strive for optimal mental physical health, right? There may be things in life that happen that impact our mental health. It could be loss of a loved one. It could be loss of a job. It could be something that's situational that happens. No different than if we were physically well and we get COVID, we get the flu, we get the cold, right? We go to the doctor, they give us a treatment, whether that's antibiotics or tell us, hey, we need to rest to get back to optimal wellness. Similarly, with mental health, you may go through some things, you go see a therapist, or you see a practitioner, or whether it be, in my case, with student athletes and professional athletes, they may not see me every week, but they may come to me and say, hey, I need some strategies on how to manage this thing. The goal is to give them those things prescriptively, and then we can get them to a place of wellness. Then there's mental illness, right, and physical illness. If people have diabetes or they have a terminal illness that requires a little bit more treatment, right, to get them back to optimal wellness, we talk to them about, hey, here are all the options and things that you could do. If you have an athlete or people that you know who are mentally ill, who have depression, schizophrenia, bipolar, whatever the case may be, there are ways that we can manage that, right? No different than we can manage diabetes, we can manage lupus. And so as I talk about mental health, I want you to think of it in that realm of like, there's no somebody's mentally strong or mentally tough or mentally weak. There's a continuum. And at any given time, I'll get you right at this point. At any given time, we can go through things where, 5 of us experience mental health challenges or things in life that will challenge and impact our mental health. 1 in 5 will experience a mental health diagnosis. So think of it as that continuum, right? And then when we talk about things such as training from the neck up and not just the neck down, it isn't just limited to sports performance. These things can help you be well in life in general. You had a question? Mm-hmm.
What does that really mean?
So mental health, mental recovery, or mental agility is another word that I like to use. In terms of, I talk to athletes about becoming a recovery MVP, and not getting stuck in the past, right? Being in the moment, not ahead of a moment and not behind the moment. And this notion that you can recover, that it's not the end all be all, right? If something does happen in the world that I work in with athletes as a mental health professional, we talk about, okay, what does recovery look like? It isn't this is doomsday and that's the way life is going to be forever. It is, what does that look like? And recovery could look like no different than, okay, how many people have torn their ACL, had an injury of some sort, right? You had to go through this process of 6 weeks, 6 months to a year. And that recovery was more so, okay, you went from having the surgery, being on the crutches to not being on the crutches. Now you can do weight bearing, type of exercises, and then all of a sudden you're running again, right? And so recovery looks like, okay, how are we measuring success or measuring growth, not success? How are we measuring growth every day from a mental standpoint? And adopting that growth mindset and not that fixed mindset. That's another part of training from the neck up and not just the neck down, is everything doesn't have to be black and white, right? Nothing is good or bad, it just is. How am I feeling? What am I thinking? How are those thoughts and feelings contributing to my lack of growth or, my ability to grow on a day-to-day basis? I have 10 minutes and I want to give time for Q&A. So if any of you have questions, feel free to ask away, like right now.
Where do you kind of find the line between mental health and mental illness, especially when you're athletes?
Well, there is a persistent and reoccurrence of symptoms in terms of them getting worse, right? So, mental health, like I said, you have an athlete who may be going through some things and we try some treatment modalities, we have a conversation with them, they don't want to go see a therapist, but you check in with them and they say they're doing generally fine. But you notice, just by their behavior, they're not going to school, they're not doing their homework, they seem to be closed off. There's a progression of an escalation of this person is not their best self, right? And so that's when we get to a point of we need to go and have them talk with someone who's skilled and credentialed in that space to say, hey, these are the things that we want to do moving forward. Having a conversation with an athlete is hard, but I would say don't think about in terms of what not to say. In terms of some coaches and professionals are like, well, how do you do that? How do you have that conversation? You lead with care and say, hey, I noticed that there's something that is progressively going on with you. And while I'm not the expert in that, I am an expert in knowing that you don't seem like your best self.
As a gift.
So being able to get them to the next step is important, but if you see an escalation and a persistent increase in certain behaviors and language that they're using of like, I don't care about life, I don't want to be here, those are some red flags. If they're not eating, sleeping, the things they generally used to care about, they're no longer caring about, that's a red flag. Do one more question? Or?
Oh, thank you. As you've gone from collegiate to professional, do you find that are there trends, are there any major factors that are consistent between both collegiate athletes and professional athletes? And if so, what are those?
I'd say the age group. So even though I work with professional athletes who are elite and they make a lot of money, they're still young men, right? And I think sometimes that can get lost in the sauce, right? They're still young men, ages 18 to 24. That frontal lobe is developing, right? And then that is the area and space where in age range where we see some manifestation of mental illness within that age group, not just particular to that sport. And so what has been consistent for me is being able to transition from collegiate to professional is that I'm working with the same age group. The difference is that this is their job. This is what they do every day. And so there are different factors as it relates to, in the collegiate space, we want everybody to succeed. We will exhaust all resources possible. If they're not going to class, we will drive them to class. We will make sure there's a person to check that they're in class. Whereas these are young men who are being groomed to be professionals at the highest level, how they handle their business, how they operate within the organization and not just on the court. And so the difference is, or the assumption would be that, okay, they don't need the help because they're in this arena in the spotlight, and actually they do, and they're receptive. So in both spaces that I occupy, and I think I've just been blessed to have a leadership and an organization that really values the work that I do, I haven't had to deal with any pushback of that's not important. Or your work is not valued. Matter of fact, they're like, hey, you have full autonomy. Do what you need to do to build it so that we can be the best that we can be in this space. And so I think from a standpoint of just being able to access the resources, even though people assume those folks on that level have the money to be able to do that, it's still being able to educate them on the use and value of the work and who to also be able to go to, and vetting resources for them as well. And so no different at the collegiate level. Them having access to me, I travel with the team, I'm at practice, I am wherever they are collectively, that's where I'm at. And they've been receptive to it, which I think is a trend, right? At Ohio State, access was important, and what that looked like was us being everywhere. And you have to have people who are able to do that. And the utilization is actually there when you build that sweat equity with them, which is the trust piece. Mm-hmm.
Thanks for a great start to the morning. Do you anticipate implementing any kind of program-wide mental health maintenance efforts, or are athletes kind of self-identifying and coming to you on an individual basis, or was that kind of operationalized?
So currently in my role, as you can imagine, being there for 4 months, I hit the ground running. And so to my point earlier, in terms of the micro level of being able to be accessible and give the direct service to the athletes, I am looking at the infrastructure of how do I build and create and foster a culture of wellness widespread across the organization. And I have been able to kind of put some steps, first steps in place of doing that. And that is, how do we collectively talk about it, the messaging and language we use, which is very similar to what I have talked to you all about today, is training the body from the neck up and not just the neck down, talking about mind health, really giving them some tangible things. And so it may not be Candice is hosting a coffee with Candice on this mental health topic. It is, hey, such and such, I really have this cool, podcast or mindfulness meditation app that I saw. Why don't you try this for me for 5 days and give me some thoughts on how you feel about it. And that's not just with the athletes, it's with the staff as well. And so a big piece of it is being able to find what is the best fit in meeting the organization that I work with where they are, to be able to implement certain things. We do what's called a wellness hour with our staff within the business side of things, so a play on words of the happy hour. And once a month, they have a safe space where they can talk about anything, right? And so I think a big piece too is getting the right person in the position to be able to help create some of those opportunities and programs. But ultimately, it is right now, I'm in the building phase of saying, okay, this is how we conceptualize and talk about mental health, and finding ways to make that stick within our organization. And so I'm pretty excited about what's to come in that space. When I was at Ohio State, they adopted the term of training the body from the neck up and not just the neck down, which I thought was pretty dope. So there's a lot of work to do, but I feel confident that, by the end of this season and next season, the Celtics will be the leaders in mental health and wellness. So.
Earlier you were talking about strength-based mental. Wow. They want to hear on the screen. Okay, so earlier you were talking about the concept of strength-based mental wellness, and you made the statement that you can work out the mind too much. So what does mental fatigue look like?
Ooh, okay. So, like I said, the brain is a muscle, right? We have a left brain and a right brain, right? Left brain deals with all kinds of stuff where we have to like manage our lives. Right, the right part of our brain essentially is the creative aspect of focusing on being in the moment. When I talk about mindfulness, you're activating that right part of your brain. But at any moment, we could be going between right and left brain to the point to where when we have school, responsibilities, work, we're not sleeping, we're not eating, we're not hydrating ourselves properly. Guess what happens? How many of you have experienced burnout? I'll raise 2 hands and a foot. That is mental fatigue, right? If you know that you have too much on your plate, right? We live in a culture where we are in the game of life every day, yet we do not focus on taking care of ourselves, right? Imagine playing a basketball game, what was 40 minutes, like back to back to back to back to back. That's the equivalent of like your brain is like, I'm fried and I need some rest. And so you have to be mindful of energy management is another part of training the brain from the body, from the neck up. And so I'll give you an example of energy management to your point of mental fatigue. On Mondays, I do not people. And people are like, what does that mean, Candice? After work, I do not answer text messages, phone calls, emails, none of that. Like I have to manage my energy. I do not have the capacity to talk to a lot of people, right? I can be an introvert, I can be an extrovert, but I have to manage my energy when it comes to how I show up in a lot of different spaces. And every Monday, even though my phone is on, even though people text me, I've gotten to a place with my good close friends where they're like, oh yeah, you don't people on Monday, so I'll text you on Tuesday. And so it's being able to implement and set boundaries, but be able to say, okay, this is a boundary that I'm gonna set. I'm gonna feel comfortable about it because I have to put myself first, right? We all know what stretching ourselves too thin looks like, right? But then we don't know what it looks like to really put those things in place. When people say, oh, you need boundaries, right? Yeah, but like look at an NBA game or an NFL game. There's boundary lines, right? That if you go out of out of bounds, that play does not actually matter, right? And so like think about what that would look like for you in your life. What are those boundary lines for you in your game of life when it comes to, oh, that's out of bounds, so therefore it doesn't get my attention. I have 0 minutes left. 1. Okay.
You had talked about the growth mindset,
Mm-hmm.
and so in my experience, I've just seen there's a lot more fixed mindset in our youth.
Uh-huh.
Because I'm assuming because of the pandemic, like how can a coach, an educator, anybody help student athletes, I guess, get a better growth mindset?
Awesome. The question was, how can you all help student athletes get a better growth mindset, moving away from that fixed mindset? If you have your computer, phone, or you could just jot this down in the book, there's a diagram called the comfort zone diagram. So if you Google that, you go to images, it's a really great resource. So it talks about comfort zone, fear zone, learning zone, growth zone, and how we want to move people from that comfort zone into the growth zone. And for every level, it talks about specifically what that level is as it relates to a person who's in that space, and then how you can move them through that space in terms of helping develop them to move out of that comfort zone, be in the fear zone and embrace the fear zone and learn from the fear zone, go into that learning zone and then growth zone. So in order to get that growth mindset, you have to be willing and open to accept all things that come with that growth piece. My last quote I'll leave you with, and it's by George Mumford. He talks about success, and he says success is 99% failure. And so helping athletes to understand and learn that you need to embrace failure. That's another part of training the brain from the neck up, is that in order to learn how to grow, you have to first experience, failure. We want to avoid it, but we need to embrace it. If I did not embrace failure, I wouldn't be where I'm at today. So my last little point, I work for the Boston Celtics, but I applied for several different jobs at the professional level and didn't get it, right? I think part of that was just God's will, and then I'm at the place where I need to be in this moment. But I had to continue to keep learning from those interviews and those processes in order to be able to show up and be my best self in the role that I'm in now. And so helping people to understand and embrace failure and that you may not get it right. I work with elite athletes. I would love for all of them to win every game, but that's impossible, right? That's the goal, but that may not necessarily be the outcome. But there's growth, within that experience. So, awesome. Thank you all for your time. I greatly appreciate you. If you have any questions, I'll be around. Feel free to grab me. I am here, and so thank you all.
Thank you so much, Dr. Williams. Once again, wonderful, absolutely wonderful keynote.